Before starting the video, I have a small request for all of you. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe and stay with me to watch more videos like this. Imagine walking down a bustling street in Rome during the reign of Emperor Trajan. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meats, expensive perfumes, and, unexpectedly, a sophisticated plumbing system that would rival many European cities in the 1800s. You enter a grand stone building, expecting a temple, but instead find a row of marble benches where 30 of the city's elite are sitting side by side, chatting about politics and gladiatorial games while attending to their most private business. No stalls, no doors, and no embarrassment. This was the peak of Roman modernity, a world where the bathroom was the social media hub of the ancient world. The story of Rome's toilets is not just a tale of hygiene. It is a saga of engineering brilliance, strange social customs, and a level of public infrastructure that the Western world would lose for over 1,000 years after the empire fell. The Great Sink, the birth of the Cloaca Maxima. To understand the Roman toilet, we must first look beneath the cobblestones. Long before the Colosseum was built, the Romans achieved their greatest feat, the Cloaca Maxima, or the greatest sewer. Originally constructed around 600 BCE to drain the marshy lands between the city's hills, it evolved into a massive underground tunnel system. For a citizen of the USA today, who views plumbing as a hidden individual necessity, the Roman perspective was radically different. They saw the sewer as a mark of civilization. They even had a goddess, Cloacina, who presided over the sewers. To the Romans, cleanliness was not just next to godliness, it was a civic duty and a display of imperial power. The public latrine, the social club you didn't want to join. If you were a wealthy Roman living in a palatial villa, you might have a private toilet. But for the 95% of the population living in cramped apartment blocks called insulae, there was no indoor plumbing. This gave birth to the foracae, public latrines. Picture a long room lined with high-quality marble benches. Carved into these benches were keyhole-shaped openings. There were no dividers. You would sit inches away from a merchant, a soldier, or a poet. In fact, for many Romans, the latrine was where the best gossip was traded. It was the water cooler of the ancient world. If you wanted to know which senator was losing favor or which ship had arrived from Egypt with grain, the public toilet was the place to be. The design was surprisingly ergonomic. Beneath the benches, a constant stream of water, diverted from the city's famous aqueducts, flowed through a deep trench, carrying waste directly into the Cloaca Maxima. In front of your feet, a small channel of fresh running water flowed. The Xylospongium, the tool that defined an era. Perhaps the most shocking aspect for a modern audience is what happened after the business was done. Romans didn't have toilet paper. Instead, they used the Xylospongium, also known as a sponge on a stick. This was a sea sponge attached to a wooden handle. After use, the sponge would be rinsed in the running water channel at the user's feet and then placed back into a bucket of salt water or vinegar for the next person to use. Yes, it was a communal sponge. While this sounds horrifically unhygienic to us today, at the time it was considered the height of Roman sophistication compared to the rest of the world, which was still using leaves, moss, or stones. The hidden dangers, explosions, and demons. Despite the modern feel, Roman toilets were not without their terrors. Because the sewer systems were not vented like modern ones, methane gas would often build up in the tunnels. Occasionally, a stray spark or a buildup of pressure would cause a literal fireball to erupt from the toilet hole. Furthermore, these sewers were dark, damp places, perfect homes for rats and even octopuses, as recorded by the writer Alien, that could crawl up through the pipes. The fear of what lived below was so great that many Roman toilets featured images of Fortuna, the goddess of luck, painted on the walls to protect users from demons or explosions while they were at their most vulnerable. The economy of waste, pecunia non olet. The Romans were also the masters of recycling. They realized very early that human waste, specifically urine, was valuable. Because of its high ammonia content, urine was used as a cleaning agent for laundry. Fullers, the dry cleaners of Rome, would place giant jars on street corners for people to urinate in. When Emperor Vespasian decided to tax the collection of this urine, his son Titus complained that it was disgusting. Vespasian famously held a gold coin to his son's nose and asked if it smelt. When Titus said no, Vespasian replied, "Pecunia non olet," money does not smell. This phrase remains a staple in legal and economic circles today. The fall and the long wait. When the Roman Empire collapsed, so did the knowledge of its plumbing. The great aqueducts were cut, the Cloaca Maxima became clogged, and the modern convenience of the public latrine vanished from Europe.
For the next millennium, humanity retreated to chamber pots and night soil thrown into the streets, a massive step backward in public health. It wasn't until the late 19th century, with the Great Stink of London and the Industrial Revolution, that cities began to implement sewer systems that matched the scale and efficiency of what the Romans had achieved 2,000 years prior. The Roman toilet serves as a powerful reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. They lived in a world where the most private acts were public, where sponges were shared, and where the sewer was a temple of engineering. They were surprisingly modern, deeply strange, and undeniably brilliant.
The architecture of the underworld, engineering the impossible. To truly appreciate why Rome's toilets were modern, we have to look at the sheer scale of the engineering. While the rest of the ancient world was digging holes in the dirt, Roman engineers were mastering fluid dynamics. The aqueducts were the lungs of the city, breathing life into the streets. These massive stone arches carried millions of gallons of fresh water from the mountains into the city centers using nothing but gravity. Once that water reached the city, it was partitioned. First, it went to the drinking fountains. Second, it went to the massive public baths. And third, crucially, it was used to flush the sewers. The Romans understood something that many medieval kings would forget: constant flow. By keeping water moving through the latrines at all times, they prevented the buildup of stagnant waste and reduced the stench that would have otherwise made the city uninhabitable. This was low-tech automation at its finest. If you were sitting in a foraca in the 2nd century AD, you were experiencing a system that wouldn't be replicated in London or New York until the 1800s. A day in the life, the latrine as a public forum. Let's step back into the shoes of a Roman citizen named Marcus. Marcus lives in a 3rd-floor apartment. He has no toilet, so every morning he walks down to his favorite local latrine. As he enters, he doesn't see a room of shame, he sees a room of social opportunity. He finds a spot on the marble bench next to a local grain merchant. They don't look away awkwardly as we might today. Instead, Marcus asks, "Did you see the chariot races yesterday? Spiculus is in top form." For the Romans, the lack of privacy was a feature, not a bug. They were an intensely communal people. The idea of private space was a luxury only for the ultra-wealthy. For everyone else, life happened in public. The latrine was an extension of the marketplace. Contracts were negotiated, wedding invitations were extended, and political alliances were forged while the water rushed beneath them. The chemistry of the toga, the fuller's secret. But what happened to the waste once it left the pipes? This is where Roman modernity takes a turn into the brilliant and the slightly gross. Rome was a city of white togas, but how did they keep them so bright in a world without bleach or tide? The answer was ammonia, and the primary source of ammonia was human urine. The fullers, laundry workers, were the chemical engineers of their day. They placed large ceramic jugs at the entrances of public toilets and on street corners. Pedestrians were encouraged to use these jugs. The collected liquid gold was then taken to the fulanonia, the laundry. Workers, often slaves, would stand in large vats filled with dirty clothes and aged urine, treading on the fabric with their bare feet to break down the grease and stains. It was a perfect, if pungent, circular economy. When you saw a senator walking by in a glowing white toga, you were looking at the power of recycled human waste. The dark side, why Romans prayed in the bathroom. Despite the marble and the flowing water, the Roman toilet was a place of genuine fear. To the ancient mind, the world was filled with spirits, both good and bad. The openings in the latrine floor were seen as direct portals to the underworld.
There were documented cases of large Mediterranean octopuses climbing through the sewer pipes and emerging into houses to eat food left out in kitchens. More common were the rats. Imagine sitting down and feeling the bite of a sewer rat from below. This was a very real danger. Then there was the gas. Without P-traps, the U-shaped pipe under modern sinks that traps water to block gases, the smell of the sewer and the buildup of methane were constant. If a Roman brought a lamp into a dark latrine with high methane levels, the resulting explosion was seen not as a chemical reaction, but as the wrath of a demon. This is why you would find small shrines to the goddess Fortuna in almost every public bathroom. One famous fresco in Pompeii even depicts a man doing his business while a goddess watches over him, accompanied by the warning, "Cacator cave malum," shitter, beware the evil. The Great Collapse, 1,000 years of darkness. The tragedy of the Roman toilet is how quickly it disappeared. When the Visigoths and Vandals began laying siege to Rome, they did something clever. They cut the aqueducts. Without the constant flow of mountain water, the sewers backed up. The marble benches became unusable. The baths dried up. Within a few generations, the knowledge of how to build and maintain these systems was lost. Europe entered the Middle Ages, a period where sanitation took a massive leap backward. People went back to using chamber pots and throwing the contents out of windows with a cry of "Gardez-l'eau," from the French "garde l'eau," meaning "watch out for the water." Diseases like cholera and the bubonic plague found a foothold in these filthy streets, diseases that the Romans, with their modern sewers, had largely kept at bay. The legacy in your home today. When you look at a modern toilet today, you are looking at the descendant of Roman ambition. Every time you flush, you are utilizing a system of hydraulic engineering that the Romans perfected 2 millennia ago. They taught us that a city is only as healthy as its waste management. They showed us that infrastructure is the true backbone of an empire. And perhaps most importantly, they reminded us that even in our most basic human moments, we are part of a larger, connected society. The next time you enjoy the privacy of your modern bathroom, remember Marcus and his friends on their marble benches, sharing the news of the day with a sponge on a stick in hand, living in a world that was, in many ways, just as modern as our own.